Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, after years of being frontrunners, favorites, high expectations, suddenly the Suns head into the 24-25 NBA season looking a little bit like underdogs. Should we believe it? And what will it mean for the season? Coming up next.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. Welcome into Locked On Phoenix Suns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Brendon, Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing and a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons. That is Ben Garcia, the executive producer of The Drive on 910 AM Fox Sports here in the Valley. We're back. Thank you for making us your first listen here on this Wednesday. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. We're free and available on all podcast platforms. Hit that button. Get a new episode in your feed every day. Starting next week, become an everydayer. Get locked onto the Phoenix Suns every day.
I'm so stoked to be every day. Sorry, Brendon. I'm so stoked. I just jumped right in. I'm so stoked. That's going to be so good. We're going to change
6 days.
We're going to change the game here in I can't wait. Okay, I'm sorry. Let you do your thing.
Before long games, I mean, look, that's really what we're here for.
But I can't wait to be here. I can't wait to be here at 10:30 at night debating why the Suns are better than the Lakers because they beat them in triple overtime, and I have harsh opinion. Oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be great.
I'm going to get to laugh at James Harden.
Oh, I can't wait.
3 of 16 on opening night for the woebegone Los Angeles Clippers.
If people think that I can be a little crazy, just wait. Just wait. Oh, man. I can't wait to call Kawhi Leonard washed after the first game. I'm sorry. Let you do your thing.
There's nothing to do. Today's episode is brought to everybody by Gametime, the best place to buy a ticket. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA when you do to get $20 off your first purchase. And we have a little bit of expectations to talk today. So, Ben, I did a little, half a segment on this 2 weeks ago before you started, based on the ESPN NBA executive survey that came out around that time, where not only did nobody have the Suns to win the West, the Thunder got 14 of 18 votes. The only others were Dallas and Minnesota. But, of course, nobody picked the Suns to win the championship. Only the Thunder got even more than one vote in the West to do that. So that was kind of the first my head started spinning about, hey, the Suns are not even in the conversation. So we can decide if that means underrated or not. But I think it's a great starting point to just be sort of off in the distance with peace and quiet. Of course, on top of that, you can look at, the win total over-unders at FanDuel, which have them at, I think they started at 46.5. I believe that number's gone up to 47.5 now. So that's a full 2 wins below where they were last year. A lot of things that point to much lower expectations. But obviously, if you think they're underrated, it has a lot to do with how well you think how good they're going to be. So tell me, are they underrated?
Constantly, all the time. And I put this out on social media, whether it's my platform, whether it's Fox Sports' platform, or I'm sure at this point, this platform. The number one thing fans or fanboys of the NBA will say, they're overrated. Maybe to the casual NBA fan that doesn't really pay that close of attention. But they are the redheaded stepchild. No one is counting on this team to win a championship. You mentioned it. I saw that poll. It is the Mavericks. It's the Thunder. It's whoever it is. I've even seen people say, watch out for the Lakers this year because all of a sudden Anthony Davis isn't going to be made of glass and the same team that they've been running back for the 5th straight year is going to do it this year. The Phoenix Suns had clear reasons why their team imploded last year. And they've, to their credit, fixed a lot of those issues outside of the wing depth issue, which TBD on Ryan Dunn, who knows, he could be that guy. But this team is seen as an afterthought, and they fixed it all. Tyus Jones fixes so many issues for the Phoenix Suns. Even times where I have to argue with other Suns fans who think that the Tyus Jones thing is overblown. If you and I talked 2 months ago or 3 months ago, whatever, and I said, hey, what do you think of the Suns getting Tyus Jones? You would have told me that'd be awesome. It will never happen. They fixed virtually adding the Tyus Jones thing. Then in that matter, everyone goes down a spot, helping their depth. The only thing that concerns me about the Suns team is the wing issues. And everyone else has written this team off. ESPN, no one will talk about next year. They're 46 wins, which is asinine to think of, that FanDuel thinks they're going to be worse this year with another year under their belt, all those guys together. Yeah, this team is by far, and I thought about this, and I saw this the other day when I was doing some prep for the show. I kind of thought about it when I got the idea in my head, and this team is the most underrated team in the NBA for all the reasons that I just mentioned. Do you agree with that?
I think that they are falling in, well, I should say, people who talk about the NBA, whether that's professionally or just fans at home, are falling into a trap that happens a lot in sports, right? Where you can dislike things about a team and allow that to color your impressions of how good that team's actually going to be, right? Where they spend a lot of money. The big three is not a perfect fit. The injuries are going to bite them again. And I could look you in the eye and tell you all of those things are true. Maybe the big three still isn't quite the 100% version of what it could be. Maybe guys like Beal or Nurkic or others who have missed time in the past, maybe that happens again and they underperform a little bit. But that doesn't mean that they're going to lose more games than they did last year. That doesn't mean that they're a bad team. That doesn't mean that they should be knocked down to the back of, a lot of these odds, which not even, I can say here, plus 1,000 to win the West, to win the finals. I have to click down to the show more category, Ben. They're plus 1,600 behind Milwaukee.
Okay, thank you. Can you name a couple of the teams ahead of them? Just for me, really quickly.
For the championship, the Western Conference teams are all the ones that I mentioned in that survey that the executives say could win. So that's Oklahoma City, Dallas, and Minnesota. Denver seems to be getting some residual, hey, best player in the league. They won a championship 2 years ago. So those are the four West teams. Pedigree. East, Boston, Philly, New York, and Milwaukee. So the Suns are basically being looked at as the very back of the pack in terms of what FanDuel is telling us of the realistic title winners. That's basically how I read it. Because after the Suns, you're looking at a four-way tie between Orlando, Memphis, Cleveland, and LA at plus 4,000. So it falls off a cliff. That is basically either the bettors or the odds makers saying the Suns are the last team that has even an inkling of a chance. That kind of feels fair, but I still think a lot of the other elements of this group are just being sort of painted with that broad brush, but because people just don't like how this Suns team was built and sort of what it represents. So they're just thinking, oh, they're going to suck. They're not going to suck.
It's easy to pile on this team because they're not likable. Now, to us, that could change. Win a couple of games, we'll absolutely jump back on that bandwagon. But Kevin Durant's not liked. And before the Olympics, for some reason, which I still don't understand, everyone hated Devin Booker. And Bradley Beal was seen as the injury-riddled guy. He'll never figure it out. Those odds makers, it's just frustrating to me because I look around at some of those other teams. The Philadelphia 76ers, okay, so Embiid is not going to transform into the player that he always transformed to in the playoffs, which is significantly worse in the regular season. Paul George, who hasn't had a signature playoff moment, find one, just one, in the past decade outside of dunking on LeBron in the Pacers series. He hasn't had one.
He's been called that shot over Dame and do the watch thing. That was pretty big.
Okay. I'm sorry. He's never had a playoff moment that really mattered in that aspect. Okay. But if you want to call the for me, I wouldn't go that far. If you're going to talk Dame, Paul George, I'm immediately going to think of Damian Lillard step backing and draining in on Paul George to win the series.
Yeah.
My point is just we look at the issues with the Bucks, which are continue. First off, the Damian Lillard thing, Giannis Antetokounmpo thing didn't work out last year. Giannis now has a durability concern. Joel Embiid is literally, check the stats, a completely different player in the playoffs than he is in the regular season, and he doesn't hold up. Paul George, I have my worries about the guy in the playoffs. Tyrese Maxey, I love, and I'm not going to hate on that guy. The Knicks, oftentimes, you kind of need a second guy, and as much as I love Mikal Bridges, He is a third and a really, really good fourth on a championship winning team. I just don't understand that because the Suns flamed out last year, people have just thrown this team to the side, in which, in a couple of ways, expectations were just probably too high for this team last year. Super teams, which that's kind of what the Suns are, being so top heavy. Now, not bottom to top, they're super team, but at the top they are. Super teams don't win championships in their first year. They just normally don't. They're going to have more time together. They fixed a bunch of their issues. This team has now gone from a little overrated to severely underrated. And it just gets really hypocritical when people pick other teams but won't pick the Suns strictly just because they don't like them. And I wish that they would just, I don't really like this team. And so, yeah, that's why
I almost think that it's maybe a byproduct of being a super team in a way, right? Where their best players are so known too. Not only are they the way they were built is not everybody's favorite thing, but it's also like there's not a lot of people who are like, I'm ready to be surprised by Kevin Durant. Like we already know you either like him or you don't, and so that nobody's going to be won over the course of a season by KD or even frankly Booker Beal at this point. It's just a known commodity, and that's just less fun than a nice storybook like the Thunder or Minnesota last year, for instance. So I think that has a lot to do with it. But let's get into whether this is a good thing or a bad thing when it comes to the actual Suns players and what their performance in the season might feel like here in 2025. We'll get there coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by the Gametime app, the best place to buy a ticket, and I mean it when I say it. I bought D-backs Dodgers tickets last Labor Day. Gametime has a ton of new features as well. A Gametime Picks, making getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. They filter out the fluff to only show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Literally, you get the app, you even just go on their website. It gives you in the valley, in your area, the top stuff at the top. If you go into a specific event, it puts the best deals for that event at the top. So you're not having to search and sort and filter and find what works the best for you. It basically says, hey, this is what you're going to want to buy. Let's cut the time. Go ahead and click in here and we'll get you set up. Gametime Picks make that curation even easier. They also, of course, have all those costs right up front, seat views, and everything else you need right from within the app. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, Ben. So I think we're in agreement. The Suns are a little overlooked, a little underrated, to say the least, heading into the 2024-25 season. So I wonder how that'll affect the people who it actually matters about. What we think, it's a nice benchmark as we analyze the season. It matters to set expectations, everything else, be reasonable with our lovely audience here. But really, it has to do with, does that actually mean something to have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, have a little bit of a prove it mentality? Is that going to come up for the guys on this team, for that coaching staff, for that front office? Do you think that this underrated energy can actually mean something for this team this year?
Yeah, I think even more than that. Each player on this team, you could even lump Mike Budenholzer into this. Each star guy or someone of relevance has something that they're trying to prove. We touched on this last show, so I won't get super into it. Tyus Jones is trying to prove to everyone in the league he's not a vet minimum guy, and he has a make or break season to be able to go back in free agency and get the deal he wanted to get this season. Otherwise, he's just going to be a vet minimum guy the rest of his career. Devin Booker has severe elimination games in Game 6 and Game 7s that they have to overcome. Bradley Beal, do I even really need to say it? Injury riddled. He's got to show that he can hold up. And Kevin Durant, no one credits the titles he won outside of maybe you and I because it was a super team or because it was not fair to the rest of the league or whatever it is. It is absolutely a good thing. So not only do all those guys have all those motivators, which I do believe motivates them, even Kevin Durant, this is also a team that is seen by everyone as completely overrated, and that's a chip on their shoulders. Not to mention, underrated, I guess I should say. But last year, the way it ended, you don't think those guys still have that taste in their mouth? I mean, Bradley Beal, last time he was there was seen as a laughingstock because he said, "I'll be damned if I'm swept," and he was swept. Like, these guys, not only do they know everyone has counted them out outside of Suns fans, each of them have something to prove this season. And when you combine those two things together, those things can only help the Suns, not hurt them.
Yeah, it's been interesting to think about, right? Because I think last year you could have made a similar case for a lot of players on this roster. I agree with you that big picture, this team expectations were probably set too high. Coming off the KD trade, the Beal trade, everything else, the pressure that the front office kind of manufactured with their all-in mentality, it set them up to fail a little bit, I think you would have to say. But there were a lot of players on this team that had a lot to prove and a lot to gain by having big seasons. It just turned out that pressure proved to be too much for them. You know, a lot of those guys, I always call them mid-prime veterans, basically players 6 through 10, 7 through 10 on this roster, all flamed out, and that type of motivation didn't work for them. I think the fact that this whole rotation now will basically be made up of guys, not just Tyus Jones, but players who almost top to bottom have a little bit to prove, whether they were on this team that underachieved last year and have kind of a rotten taste in their mouth, or guys like, hey, even Monte Morris, even Mason Plumlee trying to extend his career, even Royce O'Neal kind of first full season here, getting this big contract. Same for Grayson Allen with the contract. It just feels like there's a lot of guys where it's a lot easier for me to say, not only do I know they're good, but I know that they have a little bit of a hunger to do even more. Whereas I think complacency and lack of energy and effort was a real problem last year. Obviously, it doesn't take, any sort of analyst to tell you that. So yeah, I think it has to matter here. And I have a question though. Who do you think is going to feed off that the most? To me, the answer is pretty obvious based on some recent history, but who do you think it is?
Man, it's tough, but I think it is Devin Booker. Is that where you were going to go?
That's where I was going to go, because I don't need to look that much further back than the Kyle Kuzma tweet about how the Olympics needed a role player. You know, last year coming off the playoffs, 36 unbothered, right? Like all these things. Now, he didn't really back that one up.
Well, they were bothered. That's for sure.
Yeah,
it's a fun saying. It's a fun slogan.
But he always feeds off this stuff. And I think the Olympics show me that he did feel a little slighted. And he kind of went into that Paris experience with like, hey, don't forget about me. And I think he'll do the same with the Suns this season.
You know, I'm frustrated because you made a really good point that I was hoping you wouldn't make because I wanted to make it. I think something that was overlooked last year, you had said it. They were complacent. They just thought they were at minimum, including myself. I'm lumping myself in this. I'll admit when I'm wrong, that they were just going to walk into the Western Conference Finals. And they, for lack of a better term, got scared straight. So not only are they seen as they are underrated because no one is valuing this team anymore. They just think it's a group of misfits that don't work together, make too much money, and two of them are getting older. And one of them is injury riddled. You could argue two of them, they would say that. But not only do you have all those things that I mentioned before, no one gives credit for Kevin Durant for his championships that he did win. Devin Booker is a playoff disappointment, which is just factually and statistically not true. Bradley Beal is injury riddled. Tyus Jones wants to be able to get a contract. They also are scared straight. Can you imagine the damage it will do to the legacy of Kevin Durant and even kinda the legacy of Devin Booker if they flame out, if they are a failure again in the playoffs? Now, I don't consider a failure the second round, but if they do the same thing this year, they go into the first round, they win one game. I mean, 2 years ago, we were talking about a championship. And if they potentially win 2 playoff games combined in the 2 playoff years they were together, that would ruin the legacy of Kevin Durant in a lot of ways, not to me, but to the casual NBA fan. And Devin Booker has that as well. They are scared straight because now they know the rest of the NBA doesn't fear them. We laughed at the Anthony Edwards. They got KD, but we got Jaden McDaniels, and it turned out to be true. I think there's a real factor to being scared straight there. I mean, I do. Yeah. And I think it is only going to make this team better.
I will tell you that you nailed it there, because the team might feed off of a little bit of being underestimated. And I think that kind of lurking in the shadows of a season is a lot easier of a place to be in order to do that kind of attack and exceed expectations than constantly being picked apart. But one person who's not underrating this team and not allowing it to kind of surprise him or believe in the fairy tale that could come together if they do play really well is Matt Ishbia. So on the one hand, they are underrated by the general public and maybe even by some Suns fans who are a little frustrated. But Matt Ishbia is not saying, oh, we'll take a nice overachieving regular season and see where it goes. No, I think that there's a lot of motivation that also is just going to come from, hey, if this thing doesn't look at least a little bit better by next spring, major moves are going to be coming. And it won't matter what kind of rated you are. You're going to be on another team. You know what I mean?
Oh, that is such a good point. That is we didn't even harp on that. And I don't even want to get there. But if they first round or they get swept in the second round, or again, things matter, how it's done and where it's done and what matter. But there's also the lingering issue of if this team screws up again in the playoffs or don't make the playoffs or whatever, there's a lot of guys getting shipped out of town. A lot of players. Or Bradley Beal is going to be looked at as a player that he doesn't want to get traded, just wants to make his money, still injury riddled. Kevin Durant, those rumors will get fired up. And God forbid,
this year with much less. So yeah,
absolutely. I mean, with much less, they were literally making up reports, up reports. And so, and I don't even want to talk about the Devin Booker thing, but that scares me too.
I think this begs the question, and this kind of gets us to how long can they stay underrated? Right? How long will it take before the expectations get ratcheted back up, before they are back in that ESPN Wednesday night game graphic of in the mix for the championship, and you got, Doris Burke saying, actually, I think the Suns, keep an eye. Like, how long will they be able to fly under the radar? And I guess, like kind of back to the same question. Which way do they want it to go? We'll get there coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What makes a championship team is also what keeps your ride or die alive. Let's see if I can get to our lovely graphic for eBay Motors. There we go. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. So whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. What I love is that you just input what kind of car you have. You search the part you need, and it literally will say, not that one. That's not going to work for you. Buy this one. And the prices are great. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, Ben, let's close it out here. Been talking about expectations this whole time. I think we are in lockstep about a lot of this stuff. I don't think it can last very long. When I look at those odds and I see that the Suns are right at the edge of that group of championship kind of favorites, we'll call them, when I see that they are just poking into that top four of Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Dallas, and Denver to win the West. This is all odds, but it's helpful, right? I even look to last year. I pulled up the article from ESPN, Ben, of what all these odds were 12 months ago when the Suns were the fourth favorite to win the NBA championship, basically neck and neck with everybody else. And plus 245, tied with Denver to win the West. there is just the allure of the stars. And it's going to be so quick, the switch back from underrated back to overrated, or I guess properly rated, whatever you want to say. And I don't know if they can kind of avoid the spotlight as long as they might want to.
That's so interesting that you would say that. I think this team is going to be written off until they hold the Larry O'Brien trophy. Unless they have such a dominating season and they're the 1 or 2 seed, but they're the runaway 1 or 2 seed. The 3rd seed is 6 games back of them by the end of the season. Every team will say, "Oh, sure, but let's see it in the postseason." That was my thing I would always say about the Boston Celtics. Oh, great. Boston Celtics are the 1 seed again. Can't wait to see Jason Tatum flame out, which he wasn't very good, but either way, I rest my case there. This team will be looked upon by the public as a team that can't do it, can't stay healthy, can't deal with the brutality of the playoffs or the physicality of the playoffs. Yeah, sure, maybe the betting markets might change, but they're interested in making money. There's also still the court of public opinion. Oh, I think they're going to hide. And I think they're going to hide all the way up until, unless, again, they have a dominating season, which I don't see that either. If they're the 3 seed or the 4 seed, and they get matched up with a Minnesota or a physical team again, everyone, and I mean everyone, will say, "Oh, same old Suns." Or if they get matched up against the Mavs, can you imagine the memes and the court of public opinion with Luka Doncic? Oh yeah, no, I'm so against that idea. I mean, this team has so much to prove, and yeah, no, it's going to be bad.
I just think people will realize how much they missed the mark with some of the analysis I was talking about at the beginning. I think there will be a little bit of a realization of like, oh, they're deeper. They have a better coach. We just didn't pay attention during the offseason because we did write them off. Okay, yeah, they're probably better than, you know what I mean? But I think you're right when it comes to playoff odds and everything else, because at least, when we get to that point and people are picking series winners and everything, I would find it hard to imagine a series, even though it's a lot of guessing right now of who the Suns would be picked to beat. But a lot of that, frankly, to me, Ben, actually says more about the other teams. And that maybe is another element of this, of why the Suns are fading, is almost all the Western Conference teams that we have been waiting to really break out in a massive way basically did it last year. Whether you're talking about Minnesota, Oklahoma City, even Dallas kind of as a real team, the 2022 run notwithstanding. This year, you even have Memphis, who people are kind of already excited to crown again. There's just a lot of teams that I think are sexier right now than the Suns. So I think that is a part of why I would agree with you that by the time we get to April, I don't think people are going to be tricked again into picking the Suns to upset a higher seed like they thought they were going to against Minnesota last year. And then everybody was obviously proven wrong there. I think you're right on that for sure.
I'm going back to a different topic, but you just mentioned a bunch of other things. I seriously cannot believe. Now, I understand why fans or other teams or the betting markets, like, let's harp down on the Phoenix Suns. But I can't believe, with all the additions that they've made, and one thing that I've always commended teams on is being boring, doing things that maybe aren't going to get the biggest headline, but it's good for the overall team. Tyus Jones was that guy. It took real cojones to fire Frank Vogel and bring in Mike Budenholzer and basically eat all that money. This team, it's not even the same team. It's literally not even the same team. The 3 guys that matter that are still there, sure. But everyone, and I'll get to this in just a second, has looked at this team like it's the same team. They all just forgot Tyus Jones is here, or they have a guy behind him, Monte Morris, that can help handle the ball too. And that's the frustrating part of it. That's why I believe it's going to stay this way forever. Because the Suns just have a narrative, or just have egg all over their face still from last year, that everyone is going to point and laugh at. And it's very similar to the Toronto Raptors for years, who would every year get the number 1 over, or get the number 1 seed or the number 2 seed and get blasted by LeBron. It's a little of that where, Oh, sure. They're going to have a good regular season. And then once the physicality kicks in, once Bradley Beal pulls a hamstring, yeah, I think this team could be up 3-1 to the Denver Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals. And people would still find a reason to, we'll see. They've blown leads before. They're not very good in game 7s. You better close it out in game 5. Like, I mean, I think this team is it's going to stay that way.
Well, it's funny because I'm sure it doesn't feel good. Easy for me to put my, pro athlete hat on and try to guess, but I would think it doesn't feel great. And yet it is kind of a nice place to be if you can get comfortable with it, right? There's some guys who can bristle at being underestimated. I don't think this is a group who's going to go that direction and be fighting it and you this and that in the media. I think if you're right and it stays that way, I kind of think that's nice for them and to just be under the radar. But we will have to see. Obviously, I still hold out a little bit of thought that, hey, if they start 10-2, 20-5, I'm not saying I think that'll happen, but I think people will say, okay, it's Durant, it's Booker. Did we overlook them? They did just win a gold medal. I don't know. There's a lot of time between now and then. We'll be breaking it all down here every day. Starting next week, we got one more episode for you, though, Friday. So hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. Get that Friday episode and be here. Ben is hyped as hell. He's ready to go for
I'm
daily.
So stoked. We are going to, we're going to kill it this year. I can't wait to bring on crazy opinions, calling Kawhi. I can't wait. I can't wait to beat that Clippers team on opening night in their arena and have the first ever win be in that new arena. That name is it Intuit Dome? I don't even know what it is. I'm upset that I even know that. It's going to be great. It's going to be so good.
For you. Yeah.
What was that?
The marketing on the stadium worked for you. They got you. They've planted the seed in all of our minds. We know what their big fortress of basketball is called. Steve Ballmer has won here, just like he did with Microsoft. But yeah, it'll be a blast. We'll be right here every day for you. So YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're finding us, hit that button. We'll be with you. Until then, enjoy your Wednesday.